Got it. Mute on that. Stream. Wait. Hello and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. It is Friday, April the 14th, 9:10 a.m. Central Time. And yes, it's a weird day. It's been weird days this week. We were Monday and Friday this week after taking a couple weeks off. We'll get back to regularly scheduled programming at some point, but it's the spring and everybody's going in different directions. And this is where we are, but we figured we would do this one today. For nothing else but to settle the great parking debate. And Scott Dochterman is going to break down the parking, just parking in general in life. Like, do you like people? Does it bug you when people back into spots so they can, when they're leaving, they can come out forward and make you wait for them to back in? That bugs me a little bit, I will say. Not a ton, but it gets under my skin a little bit. And I'm not one, I'm one, I'll back into a spot if nobody's around and I'm not holding anybody up. So there's that. And then we have the age old question: why do you drive on a parkway and park in a driveway? And Scott Dochterman from The Athletic is going to break all of this down for the listeners to settle everything that has not been settled on Twitter.
Yeah, I think I should pop up some NFL Films music or something for this, like The Autumn Wind is a Pirate.
It comes John Facenda.
Yeah, exactly. I've got some on my iPod here, but I do it when I mow the yard, if I feel like I'm hitting the 7-man sled by myself here. This great parking debate is going to be the death of me, Rob. There's no question about it. All I did the other day when the Regents docket was released, here's what they're going to talk about and vote on next week. And the University of Iowa is going to build almost 600 spot parking, 5-level parking garage outside just to the north of the transportation building, which is right across basically from Kinnick Stadium. And there's going to be walkway access, and voila. I thought, all I did was took screenshots of it. I didn't write about it.
I like the prong of the argument. There were people that were pissed off about the pedestrian mall being a copy of what Iowa State is doing. And then also folded into that is, where the hell am I going to park? How is this going to affect me? And I need to express some outrage because that's what we do.
Yes. It's clearly the most important topic going on. I mean, who knows when the thing's going to be built and done. I mean, we'll know a little more next week, I suppose, if I care to find out. I mean, I just was like, just scrolling through the docket, and it's like, oh, okay, this is probably something that people might be interested in. I didn't realize that this was the equivalent of Brian Ferentz getting, a $50,000 demotion, and that's kind of on the same par here. This, it's like the three controversies this year: Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, Brian Ferentz and his salary getting reduced and his rollover getting cut by a year, and
his benchmarks.
Yeah, and with his benchmarks, and then the great parking debate of 2023. And, I shouldn't be surprised, Rob, because, 25% of the fan base is on the concourse for men's basketball games with 4 minutes to go, no matter what the score is. I mean, they could be playing they could be ranked, the opponent could be ranked, and it's a 2-point game, the under 4. Well, yeah, but we got to beat traffic. That is clearly the most important part of your day. It's not whether your team wins or loses. It's, can you get out of the parking lot at a clear, fast time? That is the most important part. So
it makes you wonder if there's like prizes like that we don't know about, or awards that people get for getting home at a certain time or getting out of the parking lot in a record time. Hey, we broke a record.
Exactly. And I do think that that's part of it. And I think that, it's underrated because I think maybe it's a conversation on Facebook of, somebody said, hey, I went to this game and it was great and blah, blah, blah. And somebody's like, oh yeah, I saw the end of the game. Well, I didn't quite see it. I was listening to, Carrie and Dolphin Bobby on the radio at the last minute when I heard about Jordan Bohannon's shot to beat Northwestern or
Michigan State come
back and everything like that. But I beat traffic, and so you're 1-0. Iowa might be 0-1, but you're 1-0 because you beat traffic. That is clearly the most important part of the day to a lot of people.
It is, and I'll end it with this, but it's needed. I mean, they need more parking over there. They just do. And we've talked about it before in a larger sense with that area. The hospital is boxed in, the athletic facilities are boxed in. There's just not a lot of room to go anywhere. So going up makes the most sense when you're talking about parking. And I'm all for it. It doesn't affect my life one way or the other in a major way. I don't know, maybe they put the media in that ramp and it's a different walk for me than the clock tower. If they were to put us farther away for parking, that's fine too. There are a lot of schools that do that. It's not so from a personal standpoint, I would think that fans would welcome this to get, to acquire more parking closer to the stadium.
I would totally agree. And I think that's probably, when you're talking about 600 spots over 150 or whatever, I know that they're going to move the water tower. They're doing a lot of stuff that's kind of crazy over there, but
so they're taking the water tower down and replacing it with this thing.
No, this thing
or they're going to add it.
That's going to be like a different building over there. And then they're going to, but this is like, we're lot 43, really where the old bubble was. Yeah. So that's kind of where it's going to be, but so what, I guess it's, it just fascinates me that this has become such a big deal because, lot 3 is where we park and that's like a 5-level garage that's got walkway access and everything like that. And then, of course, the Iowa State fans chimed in, oh, look, they're copying us. And I'm like, well, yeah, but the walkway was there before you guys built your bridge, which is tremendous, and we'll get the chance to see it. Those of us who haven't, I have seen it. It is great. It's cool. This one is not in that ballpark. That was clearly much more interesting.
Iowa State wins the battle of pedestrian walkways.
Yes, it does. I think Iowa should just concede and not even think that that it matters. But the thing is, Rob, no matter what would happen, and I figured that out with this debate, no matter what happens, people really just want to complain. And that's, and I just don't know what else to say when it comes to that. It just floors me that this became such an issue, especially because, and again, it's not even about the parking. It's about getting out after the game. Yeah. I think that's what people are most agitated about. Oh my God, I can't. How long is that going to take you to get out of the game? Well, I don't know. For those 5 games or 7 games you go to every year, it might take an extra 15 minutes. That's huge in the scheme of things. But anyway, I digress.
Life is full of trade-offs, and it's, as we said, we've gotten to the point where anything can be debated on social media and will be debated, and there's somebody who's offended or getting the short end of the stick or just pissed off to be pissed off, and that's the way it's going to be. And my life has been improved since I've waited away from those conversations, and it's hard to do. And for you, it was directed right at you, and when it comes at you in a barrage, it can be annoying. But whatever, these things are very trivial in the grand scheme of life. And on our previous podcast on Monday, Scott, as per usual, shortly after we were done, or maybe happened towards the end of us wrapping up that podcast, after talking about Iowa men's basketball and the transfer portal, Iowa men's basketball acquired somebody out of the transfer portal, Ben Crick. I'm told it's pronounced Crick. The E is silent. He is I looked, he is listed at 6'9", 220. Philip Rebraca listed at 6'9", 230. If that gives you a comparison. I don't know how accurate those heights and weights end up being. Leading scorer in the Valley last year at Valpo, definitely has a nice offensive game. He averaged around 6 rebounds a game, 5.8 rebounds, something like that a game.
Yeah.
So not the strongest rebounder. Those numbers are a little bit low for a big guy, I think, in the Valley, but certainly a scorer, and certainly a much needed addition to the front court with Rebraca leaving. So yeah, it's a good start for Iowa in the portal. I listened to Franz, and we'll get more into that in a second, but Franz had some media availability last night, Thursday, April the 13th. He said they're looking to take 1 or 2 out of the portal. Mm-hmm. So this may be it. Maybe they add another one. I know 2 of the 3 that were anticipated to visit are not. The minor kid from Merrimack is no longer visiting. BJ Mack from Wofford is still scheduled to visit. We'll see if that turns out, but at least they got 1 addition out of the portal in the bank so far, and now they can kind of maybe be a little bit more selective here, Scott.
Yeah, that's the good thing for Iowa, that they've at least got this guy. It's almost to the equivalent of, Cade McNamara coming to Iowa football. You got him right out of the chute, and this is a guy who fits perfectly for what the program wants. And it's really interesting to me to see how the 3 premier ball programs, women's basketball, men's basketball, and football, all kind of align in what they're looking for out of the transfer portal and out of these types of newcomers. And that is, you've got a guy who's a second-team All-American, academic All-American. Not only was he a quality player, he was first team this year, third team the 2 previous years in the Valley, but he's always been on a scholar athlete first team. So he's smart, dedicated off the floor, but also a very good player on it. So I think that's really a good start for Iowa. Now it's a matter of, as you said, rebounding. That's going to be, what was he asked to do?
Yeah.
I really don't know. He's
a good passer. His assists, he averaged over 2 assists a game. I know, just reading some scouting reports and watching, there is a highlight video on YouTube of him from his time at Valpo. You can kind of get a feel for his game a little bit. And I was impressed with his ability to see the floor and pass. And that's, as you know, Scott, that's super important in Fran's offense.
Yeah, exactly. And they're losing maybe the best passer, they've ever had in Connor McCaffrey. I mean, and I'm not suggesting like assists and all that kind of, he was tremendous because nobody could feed the post like he could. And they're going to need, even though this guy's a post, but passing out of the post is a big deal too. So I think that's going to be really important for him, his well-rounded game. He fits in like a glove. Now what position does he play? What do they ask him to do? Rebraca, we could say, really played well at the 5. I thought better than he would have been my MVP this year, just because I think he was, he really came to play. He was the best player.
I thought he was the most consistent for sure. Yeah. Night in and night out.
Yeah. Chris Murray was the superstar.
Yeah.
But, I think he went from being a nice role player a year ago to being, one of the top 15 players in the Big Ten this year. And that's what Crick could end up being like. Now, do they ask him to play the 5? I thought Rebraca at times looked like he would have been much better off if there would have been a primary post with him so he could do more things. Kind of like when you could take the point guard off the ball and let the point guard shoot a little bit more. And I think that really would have been helpful for him. But, so does Iowa get a 5 out of the portal, or do they just say, okay, we're just going to play the way we've been playing, which is, a 4 playing 5. And if we get dominated, a game against whoever Purdue lines up at center, because they always get a big guy. That could end up being the case too. But I do think they do need probably somebody in the backcourt as well. But that's just me.
Yeah, and it seemed, again, I wasn't there, so take this for what it's worth, and I appreciate the folks that did go and posted video of Fran from last night. It sounded like, at least from what he anticipates, that Ulis and Ogundele are the two that it seemed like those are the two that are going to leave. It didn't sound like he was anticipating anybody else going. But they do have 2 scholarships to play with right now. And like you said, it would be interesting to see if they go like for another interior player or somebody in the backcourt. If you look at the makeup now, you've got, Patrick and Perkins are probably your definite starters. Yeah. Probably Sanford, I think. Those 3. Then what do you do at point? And, Cricky's probably going to start. And then what do you bring off the bench in the post? If it sounds like Mulvey's staying, what kind of stride? He's so important. If he can make some strides this offseason and take a step forward, that would be just huge for this team, because you also have Josh Dix coming back, DeSante Bowen, obviously point guard. They have some pieces to work with in that backcourt. How much does, Owen Freeman, is he a guy that could come in and impact right away? I think he's got a chance to. Price Sanford, what's he give you? Brock Harding, the young man from New Jersey, whose name I still always forget, but, 4 true freshmen coming in, how much can they contribute? It's a big year, Scott, for Iowa basketball. This is there's no Murray's back. You lose Connor. Bohannon's gone. Garza. I mean, a lot of the staple guys, a lot of the impact guys are gone now. Perkins and Patrick have to be much more consistent than they've been in the past. Sanford as well has to take that step forward. It's going to be interesting to see how this all shakes out.
Yeah, I mean, at the forefront here, and I think Crick helps, no question. But, I mean, this is a reset year. I mean, you're losing NBA players, pro players in the case of Rabracha, but, Chris Murray will be a first round pick. And it's funny to think about this, Rob, because really up until, Keegan, there weren't any first rounders, there were some second rounders. But Ricky Davis, and then it went to Keegan Murray, and now you got Chris Murray, who's going to be a first rounder. And I see people have kind of jumped on, though he's not ready yet. Thanks for being the great NBA analyst that you are. But the NBA
Twitter NBA analysts,
message board NBA guys who I haven't watched the NBA for a while, not since Jordan and the Bulls, but I don't think he's ready for that. Well, okay, thanks. I'm sure that's helpful. Do you even know about the play-in series? Well, what's that? That's, the way things go. But I mean, I'm being really an asshole today, I admit it, but
it's built up. It's built up this week, so let it out. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, exactly. It's my own little Festivus here in the middle of April. But no, but when you do, there are question marks. All of these players that are returning who are going to be the stars or the leaders, if you will, there are question marks. Consistency with Tony Perkins, I guess, according to the people who were there last night. I didn't get an email about it, but other people did, that they were talking. And that was, Tony Perkins had a wrist surgery or a hand surgery or something.
I did not see that.
Yeah. Then you look at Patrick McCaffrey and, his, how to hopefully he handles anxiety. Great. But that's not a thing where it's done. It's not like a sprained ankle.
No. And I wonder if it ramps up a little bit when there's more of when he's more of a focal point of the team. That's something you have to be concerned with too. I mean, those of us that have, that have experience and exposure to mental health issues and things like that, as you were alluding to there, Scott, they're just really unpredictable.
Yeah, I mean, things change.
Yeah.
It could be over grades, it could be over personal relationships,
Yep.
it could be over anything. And I mean, it doesn't take like some sort of boom moment
Hmm.
and oh my gosh, I'm nervous as hell because I got to hit this free throw with 5 seconds left. It's not like that. It could be I'm leaving the house.
Yeah.
I mean, it's seriously like that. Peyton Sanford had some huge moments, but he's going to be the focal point now of every team. I mean, it's just, and Crick is an accomplished player. I expect him to be a very good player, but it is a huge step up night in, night out to go from the Valley, which no longer has Creighton or Wichita State, or even Loyola,
Yeah, they've lost a lot.
They've lost their really key teams, and UNI has not been consistent at all. I mean, they haven't been very good, really. Drake has been, but still, so he's going to have a big step up, and then you've got a lot of newcomers, as you said. Dembele is coming in, and
thank you.
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce his first name, but I can say Dembele. I expect Freeman to be a rotational guy. I don't know.
I think you got to get minutes from him.
Yeah.
Quality minutes from him. Just when you look at the makeup of the front court, I think you have to.
Yeah. Brock Harding, I don't know. There's something about him that I kind of think, yeah, he's not really highly sought, but he's one of those guys that he's going to walk in and he's going to have some swag and he's going to come in and be a tough, hard-nosed guard. And you're like, yeah, you got to get that guy in the game, because he does something. And, kind of like Bohannon was, pedigree was.
He reminds me a little bit of was it Braden Smith or Brandon Smith, the point guard for Purdue this year, the freshman that they got. Mm-hmm. He's not as big as Smith, and game probably isn't that advanced, but he's a gamer, man. He makes plays and he makes people around him better.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think he has that kind of almost chip on his shoulder like Bohannon did when he came here.
And that pays off. How does it go with summer workouts with him and Desante Bowen? That to me is going to tell us a ton. And then finally, Bryce Sanford, really the signature player of this class. And, can he step right? I expect him to come in and play quite a bit right away. Now, is it him and his brother playing side by side? I mean, is it going to be like a Murray's situation? That would be kind of fun. But then you look at the holdovers here, and they need to get something out of them. I think Josh Dix has got some capabilities to maybe even hit the starting lineup.
I think he's going to take another step forward. I mean, I'm not going to say people forget, but it's good to remember that he was coming off a major injury. And I thought he got better as the season went on. He got a little bit more confident physically. Yeah. It helped him, from a mental standpoint with his game. And I'm with you. I think he's got a nice ceiling.
Yeah. Yeah. As you said, a gross injury. I mean, Paul George,
yeah.
And then to come back, I expected him. I didn't think he'd play. I thought he'd redshirt.
No, I didn't either.
And the fact that he did play and played pretty well, and he was a freshman. Let's not forget that's.
And he played some point guard, which he didn't play a lot in high school.
Exactly. So I thought he did well. What you do need to see, I know there's like an obsession there with Nimmers. I don't know what to think of that. I think I'll just let that one, whatever, how do you want to describe it? I'll let that one go and see what happens. But yeah, Riley Mulvey is a key player next year. I mean, he's had 2 years. It's a tough spot. He was kind of underdeveloped. He probably came to Iowa too early, when he came a year early. How does he develop over the summer and in the fall? That's going to be massive, because if, bright side here, if you get Freeman and Mulvey to compete quite a bit at center, and then you have Dembele, maybe he comes in and he's pretty good. Maybe he's like Melson Basabi or something like that right away. Then you feel pretty good about your front court. You're like, okay, we don't have an all Big Ten guy, but we at least have guys who can play. And then that allows Crick to do what he does well. That allows Patrick McCaffrey to run the floor and not have to post up or anything. And the Sanfords could be on the wing.
Yeah.
Then it's all about the backcourt. And, the one thing I did like and appreciate about this year is Dasonte Bowen didn't play very well early, and he got kind of benched and he was not in the rotation. But later on, he worked his way into the rotation, even above that of, at times splitting time with Aaron Eulis. And I thought, okay, they haven't given up on him, and he hasn't given up on himself at Iowa. He didn't just sulk and say, all right, forget it. I'm going to go ahead and, I'm going to transfer or whatever. No, he's fighting. So, how he and Brock Harding, what do they do with Tony Perkins? Is he going to be the 1 or is he going to be a 2? I mean, there's a lot of things to work with this team. I mean, I do think it's kind of a reset year. I don't think people's expectations should be that high, but I also think that they have the potential to, if things work out, that they could play hard, play well, and potentially surprise a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree with you. And there's probably going to be at least a little bit of a shift from the center forward focus of Garza and then the Murrays to more wing with Patrick McCaffrey, wing with Tony Perkins, more of like when Peter Jock was a focal point. And Fran does a good job with that. He knows where, who the go-to guys are, and runs things for them. So it's going to be a matter. I'm with you. I think the consistency of the guys that we've seen, at times high level of play from Patrick, Sanford, and Perkins, those guys need to be consistently good. And then those role players need to figure it out, Crick and whoever the point guard is, and those bench and role play, the true freshmen, everybody. That's such a key is, guys come in, the whole guys coming back that have had decent roles now have bigger roles. And then how do they fill those roles, and how do some of the other guys fill in around them? And that's how you make a team, right? It seems simple, but that's really how that comes together from a chemistry standpoint, is really determines how good or bad you're going to be.
Right. And I think this is what's interesting about Iowa. And you hit it, said it well when it came to Fran, that every year or so, and at least is this way too, every year or so, they have that high level player, that all Big Ten player, starting with, in his case, Devin Marble, and then working through the Aaron White and Jared Utoff and Peter Jock and Tyler Cook and, and on and on. And,
and those guys all look different.
Yes. They're all different positions. They play differently. Garza was, different as a center than Adam Woodbury, who was a pretty good center. He's just not an offensive center. Even Aaron White and Jared Utoff are completely different. Yeah. The Murrays are different. Tyler Cook is different. The one thing that they haven't really ever had, and this may be the one thing that's prevented them from going to the second weekend, from really reaching that upper level, is a do-it-all point guard. The guy who can score at will and pass at will, the 20 and 8, scorer to assist, point guard, that when there's 30 seconds left, he's going to score, or he's going to take the shot, and he's probably going to get fouled if he doesn't score. That's the guy that they've missed out on a lot over the years, and it's really probably prevented them from reaching that second level. But other than that, you're not going to find anybody like that on the transfer portal. You got to build them. Maybe Dasonte Bowen becomes that.
Everybody wants that.
Yeah, right. Devin Marble was probably the closest to that. And he really thought Mike Gazelle was going to be that guy, and Mike was a good player, but
Jake Kelly was good at that.
Yeah, Jake Kelly that game against Penn State, was as good as anybody. Monte Morris would have been great at that but circumstances determined that he would go with Gazelle and go with Anthony Clemens and not recruit Monte Morris, who, that might have been the guy, but that's way back when. Anyway, a lot of revisionist history here. I would say that they have a chance, but right now I would also say they've got to do it too. You've got to see the consistency. Perkins has got to be more consistent.
What helps also, Scott? The summer trip.
Yeah.
That could be a benefit for a team like this.
Oh yeah, for sure. That comes at a perfect time. You're right. Spain will be very helpful for this team, and because then they can start working through a lot of those things.
Yep.
And then 2 months later, when they're really into practice, they all kind of know where they stand a little bit. And yeah, perfect opportunity. Good observation, Rob.
Nothing much else came out of that last night. The Fran availability. It was the banquet last night. There were awards. Chris Murray and Philip Bracha shared the Chris Street Award. You can check all those awards out on HawkeyeSports.com. Fran not happy with the goings on in the transfer portal and NIL, but to his credit, he knows there's nothing he can do about it. He has to work within this system like all the other coaches in all the other sports. It really does you. I mean, you can get it off your chest and complain about, what's going on with NIL, but Scott and I have exhausted this conversation to the NCAA did this to itself, and the train's not coming back. It's left the station. So there's going to be people complaining about this throughout the years, Scott, and it's not going to change. There are going to be donors, big money donors, who help build rosters in college sports now. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, it's like complaining about the weather or
a parking garage.
Yeah, parking garage, inflation, gas prices, and I would complain about soda pop prices myself. I think
that's crazy. I don't drink a lot of that, but I get it from my kid. I'm like, what in the hell?
Yeah, it just went like doubled in price. But anyway, I remember like not that long ago, and this is old man yelling at the sun, which is what Fran's kind of doing about NIL right now. But it's like, I remember back a couple years ago when it was like you go to Hy-Vee and every now and then it'd be like 4 12 packs for $8.88 or something like that. And I'm like, now it's like 1 for $8.88.
Soda and eggs.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, I mean, you can complain all you want about NIL, about the collectives, about buying athletes, whatever. Guess what? It's just the way it is. And football, starts tomorrow. Starts the latest round for the transfer portal for football through the 30th. It's earlier than normal, which is crazy. But anyway, you can complain about it, but if you're not in it, you're dead. So
is it a coincidence that the transfer portal opens the same day as the traditional tax day?
Yeah.
I'm sensing a connection there.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
Yes, portal day. We're happy transfer portal opening again eve.
Yeah.
To everybody out there who celebrates.
Yes, exactly. This is we just need like a poll,
and carnival music.
Yeah.
Or circus music. Yeah.
I mean, I don't expect this to be nearly as big or as productive as as December. It won't be, but for a team like Iowa, and we could segue into this,
let's do it.
There, I think wide receiver, again, just like it was in the winter, wide receiver is very important right now. When they only have one scholarship guy available now, you cannot go into the season next year with the same shit that you dealt with last year. Now, again, Keegan Johnson, that was mental as much as it was physical. But the injuries popped up. The injuries are there now too. And you're going to get 3 more freshmen, but they're freshmen.
It's a position that injuries are prevalent.
Yes. I mean, Seth Anderson can't, you brought him in. He can't compete this spring. Nico's out. He's been in there and in and out, but now you have the only one that's
Bostic's out.
Yep. You've got to have people there in June.
Brecht is gone.
Right. You've got to have people there in June. You have to,
mm-hmm.
because what you did at quarterback is substantial. You've got a better quarterback. You would expect the line to be better. I'm not saying that'd be great.
Why invest in a quarterback if you're not going to invest in the pieces that he needs around him?
Exactly. You can't just have, you could try to go 2 tight end on every play, but that just doesn't work either. You're going to have pass catchers. And, if you're Kelton Copeland, whether or not it was his fault for the lack of productivity or everybody else's, you're going, damn, I don't have anything. And I've never had anything other than those years where you had Brandon Smith and Smith Marset and what have you. So I think they need to hit it and, at least hit one, maybe two. I had them at 85 scholarships right now, Rob. But we also know that not everybody at Iowa is going to, after the spring, is going to stay. I mean, it never happens. It didn't happen when you had to transfer and sit out a year or go to a lower level. It's not going to happen here too. There's going to be people who understand their piece of their place in the world and that they don't want to be a part of it, be the third or fourth team cornerback.
Yep.
When you got young players right now, like Deshaun Lee and Cohen Entringer and TJ Hall that are basically second teamers right now, you might want to evaluate whether if you want to play college football, you might want to look around.
I was looking at this morning, Scott, before we hit record, and take these for what they are worth, folks. On 3 transfer portal rankings so far in 2023, Iowa checks in at number 37, 1 spot behind Texas, 1 spot ahead of Utah. In 247 rankings, Iowa's at 43, 1 spot ahead of Notre Dame, 1 spot behind Minnesota. I think much like everything else with the transfer portal, NIL, things like that, it's going to take time to get your bearings on how to rank transfer portal classes, I guess, for lack of a better term. So again, take those for what they're worth. And Iowa certainly, I would think, is going to add at least 1 receiver in this late period. It's interesting. Some programs have wrapped up their spring already, so they'll be a little bit ahead in terms of, as Scott was talking about earlier, in terms of guys saying, okay, I've gone through the spring, I know where I stand. But Iowa's got like a week left. I think guys within the Iowa program have an idea now of where they stand. I don't think a lot of things will change over this next week. Could have injuries, things like that are impactful. But for the most part, I think guys know where they stand. And we on the outside like to evaluate and predict depth charts and where guys stand. There's nobody better to understand their position on a roster and where they stand amongst their peers than the athletes themselves. They go through practice every day. They know how they stack up. They know how they're being evaluated by the coaches. And now you get to this end of the period, kind of like we just saw with basketball. Joshua Gundele and Aaron Eulis decided after meeting probably with Fran post season meetings, this will happen here towards the end of the football spring. There'll be another evaluation. Defensive back is obviously a position that's got a lot of depth to it, where guys may look for more of an opportunity to play, a clearer path to playing time. So that's what to keep an eye on. But you can bet your bottom dollar that tomorrow, when this portal opens, whether Iowa's at 85 scholarships or 80 scholarships, it's going to be active and get into the portal right away and start working.
Yep. And it needs to. And because let's face it, looking at this team, it has a championship level defense.
Yep.
It has,
like last year.
Yeah. It has as good of a defense as there is in the Big Ten, and one of the top 3 or 4 in the country, in my opinion. Offensively, it's not close, and we know that. But when you start to look at the pieces, tight end, it is as competitive as anybody. You look at quarterback, I feel secure. I mean, he's a 3rd-team All Big Ten guy 2 years ago, led the team to a playoff, led Michigan to the championship. Very capable quarterback. Is he a pro? I don't know, but he's certainly a pretty good college quarterback. And
what is pro define? You've got XFL, you've got USFL. I know you're talking NFL.
I would say draft pick. Is he a draft pick? I don't know. I think he maybe, but
it could be dependent on what he shows this year.
Yeah, exactly. Is he a sick? If he is, he's probably a 6th, 7th rounder, but still, or either way. I think at running back, they're very good. And I think Caleb Johnson, who is really kind of flown under the radar a little bit. I think he's absolutely capable of being a top 5 or 6 running back in the Big Ten, which says a lot considering when you have Braylon Allen and Blake Corum and, Maya Williams and Travion Henderson. I mean, there's some great running backs, Nick Singleton, and he's, approaching that category. So and then I think there's other ones behind him. LaShawn Williams is good. I think Jazz Patterson is good. So when you look at that, you go, okay, tight end, quarterback, running back, they're competitive. They're a team that could win 10 plus games, go to Indy, and at those positions are capable of competing in Indy. Offensive line, no, but I still feel like that's a unit that can get better. I'm not going to say that there's a Tristan Wirfs or Tyler Linderbaum or, anybody like that. But I think Rusty Feth, hey, this team needed a Rusty up front. So.
Every day that goes off the calendar, Scott, we get a little closer to Rusty time.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to interviewing Rusty.
Yeah, me too. I talked to him on the phone for a while. He's a good guy.
Yeah. He looks like a good guy, and it's interesting. It's a different dynamic, and I know you get this too. That we're talking, when you talk to a Cade McNamara, Eric All, or Seth Anderson, guys that have been in college already. It's a different vibe than when we get true freshmen at media day, and they're like a deer in headlights. These guys know what's going on. Yeah. They know what's expected of them. They know what they can do. And it's kind of it's kind of a neat parallel to the true freshmen.
Yeah, they're legitimately adults.
Yeah.
So that's something there. It's always an interesting cycle. I'm sure you know it really well. When you talk to players who are really young in high school, like freshmen, sophomores, that they don't know what the hell they're doing. No. They are so far under, they're old enough in Missouri to get married, but they're not, old enough to do anything else in this world. But then when they're older, like junior seniors, and they've kind of been through the recruiting wars and been a very accomplished high school athlete, that they're usually pretty good and easy to talk to. Then when they get on campus, they get that, as you said, deer in the headlight look, because oh my God, I just ended up here. And now I realize that I'm not the shit like I think I am. And then when they first get, maybe they become a contributor and they come to Tuesdays and they're a sophomore, they're kind of like trying not to say anything wrong. So they say nothing. And it's like, oh God.
Yeah.
You're trying to squeeze, blood out of a rock, you're just not getting anything. But then by the time they're upperclassmen and you talk to them about things, and usually they're pretty good. They're back to being themselves. And then of course, if they're pros, they're just loose as a goose. But kind of getting back to the portal and stuff. I mean, there are some people that you look at, and I don't know if it's right to name them or to just glance at them and think, all right, you wonder if they're going to be here or not. That's just it's a big question mark, because they have to know, as you said, when they're lining up and they're third team all the time, and you've reached that sophomore or junior fall coming up, it comes down to that decision that every player has to make, especially in football. Do I want to play, or am I kind of happy to be here and happy to be at this school and contribute? And most leave, but then you have like Devontae Young, a few years ago, he's like, hey, I'll do whatever it takes. I want to be here at Iowa. And, Dallas Craddock, and he had the extra year because of COVID, but those players want to graduate. They like their team. They like where they live. They like being a part of it. And so, and I don't think there's a wrong answer. I don't think anybody should be.
No, it's a personal decision.
Yeah. I mean, it's
their life.
Right. Because if you're reaching where this will be your 4th year as a junior coming up in the fall, then, your amount of time of playing football is finite, and do you want to play or is it, hey, I just want to be here and contribute and still work my ass off and maybe get a chance to play. So I think there's some real interesting, thoughts and discussions here, but I do think that receiver has got to be, they got to get 2. I
Yeah.
think, one in a minimum. But I'm interested when you said Minnesota, that really set me kind of my mind going, woo, what the hell? Because Minnesota has lost a shit ton of players. I mean, they've lost some really good players to the portal, and they got some nice pieces, but I write down all of them, and 3 of them are from Western Michigan. They were good players at Western Michigan. Wide receiver from Charlotte, an edge from North Carolina who had 0.5 tackles for loss, and an offensive tackle from Southeast Louisiana. And then they lost 17 players. I mean, so I don't know. Granted, that's
On3 does a nice job of the just kind of summarizing. And I'll read I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically they're not measuring these schools against each other. This is a proprietary algorithm that determines if a school has improved its overall team talent, stayed the same, or declined in talent during the transfer window. And you look at Colorado, it's the number one. It's ranked number 1 right now, obviously Dion, but it's added a 5-star, Hunter, 3 4-stars, lost 1 4-star, and then picked up 23 stars and lost 9 3-stars. That's just one picture of one school. So you're saying they've added 24 and lost 10 in the portal. That's wild, man. That's a quarter of your roster, more than a quarter of your roster.
That's insane. I'll be anxious to see, is it just fun off-season discussion about how Dion has put this all together, and then what happens when they play USC and they play Oregon and those teams, to see if that's legit or if they're just, playing to go fish here, likewise. But like I said, with Minnesota, Dylan Wright was a good receiver. Trey Potts went to Penn State. Mike Brown, Stevens is out. I look at like Wisconsin as a team that's kind of improved, but I'm anxious to see, does it all come together for them?
Wisconsin, again, I'm using On3. They're 6th.
Yeah.
They gained 3 4-stars and 9 3-stars and lost 10 3-stars. So they gained 12, lost 10. So
yeah.
And and obviously those are just numbers, it says nothing about who the players were. And again, you're looking at star rankings, and those are very subjective. So it's hard to know. And like I said earlier, it's going to take us some time, right, Scott, for us to figure out, how this all works. And it's going to be ever changing too with the NIL and transfer portal.
Right. Because when you look at Wisconsin, they completely revamped their system. They have a new coach.
Yep.
They have a new offense. And this is something that's, radical for them, because it'd be just as radical if it came to Iowa. When you got Phil Longo coming in from North Carolina to run kind of an air raid attack, and you bring in, Mordecai as your quarterback, and from SMU, and you bring in 2 other quarterbacks. I would say it's an upgrade no matter what over Graham Mertz, who really was probably one of the bigger disappointments that I can remember in Big Ten annals, as far as a player that just never he had an incredible debut.
Yep.
And then
all went downhill.
Got COVID, and it just fizzled and wasn't very good after that. But, they really, they brought in so many different things. I'm anxious to see how they put it all together, but I do think that it's interesting. Iowa's, I think, is kind of typical for the Iowa program. Pretty solid. Rusty Fett
and address needs.
Yeah. They lost some pieces. Let's not kid ourselves. I think when you look at the receivers, that's huge. When you look at Arlen Bruce and Keegan Johnson, losing those 2 to me is seismic, because if they had them right now in practice, you'd feel a hell of a lot better about this offense.
Yeah, it's completely different than when you look on the defensive side of the ball. Would Iowa be better this season with Terry Roberts and Justin Jacobs on the roster defensively? Shit, yeah, they'd be better. But you can absorb those losses on defense. It's a lot harder to do it on offense.
No question. And because they are really at the bare bones at wide receiver, and they have to incorporate more players to be able to do that. And the one good thing, I guess, if you will, about receiver versus even offensive line is receiver could come on campus in early June and throw 7-on-7 every damn day with Cade McNamara, who would be healthy then. And you can play, and work on those routes and work on all those things. So when you do get the pads on, it's not foreign. With offensive line, you cannot replicate anything until you actually put the pads on. And then you're going against one of the best defensive lines in the country that's really deep. That's different. And that's why I was like, I'm pretty damn bummed for them that, Dejon Parker can't be a part of that this spring, because I think we all wanted to see how he could perform. So, but Nick Jackson will come in and he'll step right in. He'll be a really good player. And I would expect him and Jay Higgins to be that at linebacker. And I think they'll probably run more cash than they ever have before, with, you might as well just call it Sebastian Castro.
Yes. Because he should. There's a good NIL opportunity. He could do it for a bank.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, that should be his agent, man.
Get on that.
Yeah, Sebastian.
Somebody get
Castro, on that. But hits like a linebacker. And then he's also, I had one coach tell me, and just in a casual conversation, that he thought Castro should have been the MVP of the bowl game, even with Cooper DeJean and Xavier Wampa having pick sixes. that Castro played I'm going to call him Castro from now on. Played the best game out of anybody on the secondary. So I don't know, but when you do stack things up, offense has to get better. Now they'll look better when they play Utah State and Western Michigan, but going to Ames won't be an easy feat. If they don't have a threat on the outside, and I expect Ragaini and Vines to be good, and maybe Anderson be ready, but you still need a number 4 and a number 5, and no offense to there's a reason why they're not on scholarship. They want to put them on scholarship, and I'll sing a different tune. But I think that right now this is why they're there.
Yep. And we'll see the developments in the transfer portal and what Iowa is able to hone in on and acquire out of that. And we'll talk more about that as we move along here on the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. I do want to let you folks know that support for this podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. Check them out. Systems Unlimited, doing great work for over 50 years, very important outfit in this part of the state, and we appreciate their sponsorship here. We're going to hear from a few more sponsors here, and Scott and I will be back on the other side. Hang in there. And we're back on the Hotspot podcast. Scott, I've gotten some feedback, some results, some intel. Folks are taking advantage of the 10% off at Ariza. Okay. We talked about this Monday on the Hotspot. We'll continue to talk about it. You folks need to take advantage of it. Ariza, Asian Cuisine, Iowa City, in the Highway 6, Highway 1 area. Check them out. Just mention our podcast, Hawk Fanatic, Hawkeye Hotspot, Mailbag, whatever podcast you want to mention from this feed, go into Ariza, 10% off your bill. Simple as that. Just mention us and you get 10% off. And they said they've gotten good feedback and reaction from that. And let's keep it going, folks. Get out there and check it out.
Yeah, sounds good, man. I could use some good Asian cuisine after my trip to Japan. So
fold that into your spring game itinerary next week. The trip to Ariza, 10% off if you mention the podcast. Scott, you were at football player availability yesterday. I was, again, not available for that either. So I missed football and basketball yesterday. How am I doing? I think for me, the most interesting thing, and I get the young guys, I get, TJ Hall entering or those guys. And I think, good ceiling for those guys. I have faith in the development of defensive back. To me, the key piece that you guys got to talk to yesterday is Jamari Harris. And that's, you put him opposite Cooper DeJean. If he can pick up where he left off and be even beyond that this season, Iowa's got a couple of lockdowns.
He brings a level of maturity that he didn't have a couple of years ago when we last talked to him outside the locker room at the Citrus Bowl, where he had a tremendous game, by the way. He had 6 tackles. He had a couple breakups. He had an interception late. 4 interceptions that year is kind of filling in for an injured Matt Hankins and injured Terry Roberts and injured Riley Moss at times, and played really well. Got picked on a little bit, but everybody does when they're that young. But sitting out a year, he says it's wonderful. I can't even describe what it's like for him to be back on. And he carries himself with a maturity, again, that he didn't have a few years ago, which, I think many human beings get that way when they're older. But judging by everything from his build, he's bigger. His arms are really long, but it's like they're really muscular and physical looking. I think you put those two together, and if he does continue to take off the way he did, he can be the next. He and Cooper DeJean and Xavier Wampa could all be neck and neck for the next great one. At Iowa, I think he's got that real potential, because he did play for a very, very good defense that led the country with 25 interceptions 2 years ago, and played well and played his best game, no question in my mind, in that Citrus Bowl. And I think if you get him a full year at that spot, they look really good. To me, I think the only thing with the secondary, the only question I have is depth. And then you start to realize, well, who's the one coaching them? Okay, they'll be all right.
Yeah. And, depth wise, we'll see how that is affected, if at all, by the transfer portal. How much of a hit that might take. Again, that collection of 2020 class of 2022 is pretty solid. They did well in that class. And then you have Quinn Schulte as the stabilizing force at free safety, with those other 3 that Scott mentioned. Very, very good secondary. I would venture to guess one of the better secondaries in the country, and will be a key part of this. When you combine that with production they should get with the depth on the defensive line, again, this defense it has a chance to be among the best in the country again, unless something really weird happens. I don't see how it won't be. It's
really about building and developing and maintaining depth, really at the back 2 levels. I think the front level is as good as it gets. You miss
Van Ness, obviously. That's a huge loss, but I think depth wise, you look at guys like Aaron Graves, I think is good, Yahweh Black. You look at guys that are just starting to scratch the surface that could take a huge step forward this year.
No question. And losing Van Ness, yes, he would have been a first-team All-American. I have no doubt. That is going to hurt, except for the fact that it's mitigated by 2 6-year guys. Joe Evans and he had the same number of sacks. So you bring back him, Noah Shannon, who was just a really solid, dependable guy who played his best football last year. And then Logan Lee, who's kind of under the radar. Deontay Craig was outstanding last year. And now you're excited to see him with more snaps. Ethan Herkett, now is healthy, and I think he's got a chance to really take off. you look at, guys like, Aaron Graves, what does he bring his second year? Because I think he's got sky's the limit. Y.A. Black, same thing. I always thought that he would be able to step in and be a key figure. He's not really been healthy, but once he gets healthy and stays healthy, he could be good. And then there are the younger guys that you feel like if they were in any other position group would really be able to fight for the rotation. Max Llewellyn's probably at the top of that list, but Jeremiah Pittman, I remember having a side conversation with Kelvin Bell, and he's like, I'd love to play that guy. He's really played well. It just, Brian Allen and Caden Crawford have really, Crawford's body has really changed over the last year. He just looks outstanding. And then you bring in the JUCO guys, Terrio Thompson and Jackson Filer off the edge. That's really going to be fascinating to see how they divide up the snaps. If they decide, when it's third down, that's when Filer comes in the game. He's not going to play first two downs, but if it's 3rd and 7 and we go to some sort of NASCAR package, is he coming in off the edge? I think that's something that's legitimate. And, linebacker depth is a big question, but the last spring and this spring, that's what they've had to deal with. Last spring, everybody was out. And then this year, without having Nick Jackson on aboard, you've got him and Higgins are probably, they're going to be the starters. There's no doubt about it. But, what does this mean for Jaden Harrell? For Kyler Fisher has kind of been there for a while. But, then some of the younger guys, they really like Van Kekricks and Carson Shire. That's the one that they really think highly of. They kind of looked at him as kind of like a Neiman brother type. So, but I also think, as we said in the secondary, Sebastian Castro can be, they could leave him on in a lot of traditional 4-3 sets because he's physical enough to where you don't need to worry about him playing, some of the, you don't have to worry about bringing in a linebacker necessarily. Not all the time. No, sometimes you will, but not every time.
Be interesting to see. You know what? Let's take another quick break here because I didn't take one earlier. Let's take another quick break here, get a couple more sponsors in, and Scott and I will be back on the other side. Want to talk about potential of maybe some of the incoming freshmen to help at some of these positions that we're talking about. And then also a change in recruiting rules that I really think is a good idea. So hang in there. We'll be back on the other side to wrap up with some football and get you ready for your weekend. And we're back again. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you guys for hanging in there. Tease this going into the break, Scott, but I think the one guy that to me would be a guy who might be able to fight his way into a loaded defense would be Ben Keeter. Do you get him loose on special teams? He's a dynamic player at linebacker. It'll be interesting to see, obviously, the two-sport athlete with wrestling. He's got a lot of that going on still. He's a guy that I would keep an eye on just because of the depth you talked about at that position as a guy who could come in and maybe contribute.
Right. And I think what you're going to look at with Seth Wallace, with Phil Parker, and even Kirk Ferentz is when it comes to Ben Keeter, it's first of all, is he going to be a football player for multiple years? But also, they also have to look at who's going to be the starters in 2024, because maybe Jay Higgins uses a 5th year. That's possible,
because
I can see that. But Nick Jackson won't. This is, so you've got to look at, okay, who's going to be the starters in 2024? Who's going to be competitive for that? Is Ben Keeter in the same realm as James Morris? Where it's just, hey, he's gonna, because then you also got to prepare for injuries. There are injuries that happen at linebacker.
And you look at guy. I mean, you bring up James Morris as a good example. Jack Campbell would have played more had he not dealt with bullshit his freshman year. Dylan Doyle played
You
As
know?
a true friend. I'm wondering if Keeter kind of fits into that mold where he's not a guy that maybe is an every down linebacker, but a guy who get his feet wet and play him on special teams.
No question. And I think that's where you look at guys, who are all there ahead of him. And, because next year you've got a huge group of linebackers,
right?
All in-state guys, all studs, all guys. I think you could probably play at 3-4 when they're coming up. But, and also
2-5.
2-5. Yeah. Yeah. They can all just stand up. They can just play the Raider every down. But, it does put a lot of, this is the shit or get off the pot moment for their sophomores.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jaden Harrell and Carson Shire have kind of taken that step forward to where you think that they're going to be competitive for the depth chart this year and potentially as starters in 2024. Zach Tweed and Justice Sullivan have not taken that step forward. Doesn't mean they can't. Maybe they are right now and we just don't know it. But when you get to this point in their careers, them, I'd say in the defensive backfield, AJ Lawson and Brendan Diaz-Fernandez, who did, it seemed, to have that, and then he got hurt. Those are players you start to go, the clock's ticking, and if you're Ben Keeter, if they think that Ben Keeter is like, okay, today I wouldn't necessarily play him at linebacker, I'll play him on special teams, but next year he might start for us, they're going to vault him up because they want to get the best players on the field. So, and then there's some redshirt freshmen there too. Jaden Montgomery, where does he end up? They need to have somebody at fullback with Eli Miller tearing his ACL. They have nobody at fullback, or at least going into the spring. So they got to figure something out there. Maybe they.
How about the guy from Drake?
Yeah, he's coming in this fall, walk on, but
get a look at him, see what happens. You never know.
Yeah, so. What else, do you got there? And then, and I think a little bit of wide at tight end, there's some of that too. I mean, I think Eric All and Luke Lachey are going to form one of the better tandems in the country, but, and they seem to like Addison Ostrenga quite a bit, but, what's there beyond that? Steve Stylianos has kind of fallen off. We haven't heard much out of Johnny Jacuzzi lately. And Caden Vanderbush, was redshirted last year, so he's probably a little bit behind everybody.
And then we'll see. I mean, we've talked about it before on the podcast, and probably will continue to talk about it. Scott, can one or more of those true freshman wide receivers help at the position that is obviously in most need of help?
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Yeah, I wish.
Yeah, I mean, you just never know until they get here, right? Yeah. I mean, we could sit here and say, Jarrett Bowie and Dayton Howard and Alex Mota won't be ready, but we don't know. I mean, we'll see when they get to camp. When they do 7-on-7 this summer with McNamara, maybe one of those guys clicks.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world for Iowa receiver, you want 5. You want 5 you feel like you can play. You can cut the rotation down a little bit, but you really need at least 4. And I think in this case, you look at Deontay Vines for sure. You look at Nico Ragaini for sure. Probably Seth Anderson. And then, it could be a combination of a walk-on and a scholarship guy. And who knows? It could be a freshman. I would guess that Alec Wick is probably going to be part of it just because he's been a part of the rotation before. And, they've relied a lot on him during the spring. But that does leave the door open for, Jake Bostic if he's healthy, or Jarrett Bowie or Alex Mota, or, insert your receiver from the transfer portal.
Mm-hmm.
Like the one guy that I know has been discussed is from St. Francis. It was really good last year. It's a smaller school, but it kind of fits Iowa. And I think he was waiting until this period to kind of get there. And Mekhi Jackson, 85 catches, 991 yards, 9 touchdowns. St. Francis is a small school, division or FCS, I believe. So what?
Yeah.
If he's your guy, he's your guy. And if he could, I think you got multiple levels here. And I'm probably more in favor for the Iowa program at this position group to go get a guy like that, as opposed to a fellow, somebody who just didn't like where they were at the Power 5 level, because this has got to be a position where people are, you got to fight. You got to understand. You got to be like happy to be here in some ways, as opposed to, yeah, I guess I'll go there.
And there are dudes everywhere, Scott. I mean, Charlie Jones is a great example of, nobody saw that coming.
Yeah.
Except probably for Charlie Jones when he left Buffalo.
Right.
That development.
Mm-hmm. And he'll be a 4th round draft pick, this year. And he would have been.
And that's what Iowa has to do. They have to catch something here, because no matter how much you want to, talk about how great Iowa is, it's a great program, great fan support, there's still the elephant in the room of this offense has sucked the last 2 years, and you're trying to convince somebody to come here and play in that offense. So it's like you said, you're not going to go get somebody leaving USC or Florida.
No,
you got to get somebody from St. Francis or a Mac school or some, but there are good players out there. That's not a death sentence.
No, not at all. I mean, as you said, Charlie Jones led the country in catches last year. Too bad he didn't lead them while he was at Iowa. Right. They could have used him doing that.
That's another story for another day, how he was utilized here.
Yeah, exactly. But you look at Corey Davis was a first-round draft pick from Western Michigan. Antonio Brown, say what you will about him off the field, and there's a lot to say, but he was also a Hall of Fame caliber player when he was on the field. And they're MAC guys. We've seen them in the Valley before, and even the South Dakota State guys. To me, I'm like, oh wow, they would be big pickups. So and who knows? We're not privileged enough to watch the practices. We don't know how they're performing, not just at wide receiver, but offensive line too.
Yep.
Because maybe they're saying we need this, or maybe they're saying, you know what, I think we're pretty good, and we're just need to continue to develop. And they probably won't tell you. They certainly won't tell you in a public setting, but you might know a lot. We'll know a lot more next week, provided that they don't just decide, you know what, we're not going to have anybody out there in pads.
We're not showing you shit.
Yeah, you're going to see drills, and that's it.
Yep.
Yeah.
We see a lot of field goal tries and punting.
Yeah, it's a lot of Tory Taylor and a lot of Drew Stevens, and maybe some 7-on-7. But
and what we've said it throughout, Scott. It's more than just the Jimmies and the Joes. It's going to be the X's and the O's this year too for Iowa. You got to put these guys in position to succeed.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. And, from all accounts, side conversations, whatever, they seem to really like Cade McNamara and how he throws the ball, that he is an upgrade there. So that's a good thing.
Hopefully they let him throw it in the end zone. That would be great. That
would be an upgrade too. Schematically, that's one thing you can really say is get the ball to effing end zone.
Yep. We got to get across the goal line.
Yeah. You don't need to throw a 2-yard out when you're at the 5-yard line and then to play for a field goal, right? That magic line it's not like hot lava. Like don't touch the floor. Back when you're a kid.
One more thing to get to, Scott, before we get out of here that I had on my list: official visits, and this makes too much sense that's why it probably took a long time for it to come in. To NCAA rules. No longer for as long as I can remember, for as long as we know, hey, this dude's got 5 visits. Where's he going? Now he gets more than 5. He gets as many as he wants. Can only officially visit each school one time, provided the coaching staff stays intact. If there's a coaching change, you can revisit officially a program that you've been to before. I love this rule. I think it's great. I mean, this is what we want. We're complaining about, guys are going in the transfer portal and leaving, and there's all this turnover. Give them as much information at the front end as you can.
Mm-hmm. No question. Great rule. Because, and everybody had that countdown of how many, remember like Caden Proctor last year, it was like, well, I've already been to Iowa all these times, and it's blah, blah, blah. So I think this is awesome for everybody involved. And I really like the last part that you said, which is that now they get a chance to revisit, because what happens if you visit somebody in the summer in June and you really like that school, maybe even commit. And then you get all the way through, and then the coach leaves. Either he's fired or he goes to a different job. Then it's like you're stuck because then you can't revisit it in December.
Now, what do we got? Three new coaches in the Big Ten West?
Yeah. I mean, Matt Rule, and that one we all knew that was, Frost was fired early, but nobody really knew what was going to happen with Wisconsin and Purdue.
Yeah.
And even like Illinois in Northwestern have new coordinators on defense. So if you would have committed to them, because, hey, I wanted to play for Ryan Walters, but I really like Illinois. Sure, you could go and visit Purdue, but you can't revisit Illinois because maybe Brett is like, hey, I got somebody here that you might like still.
Yeah.
So I think that's really a good rule change. One of the very few good things I'll say about the NCAA is this rule. So
yeah, it's nice. And I would also be was it basketball I saw? I'm not going to talk about it because I don't remember it that well, but I would be all for letting kids visit officially sooner as well. They've bumped that, sooner. They can visit earlier than they used to be able to, but I would almost be like, whenever, maybe after sophomore year, take officials if they want, and just let kids, have more control over their recruitment.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Like say like August 1st of their junior year.
Yeah.
Something to that effect, because, with recruiting expedited and the signing day now in December and not, used to be just February, that, players could go visit in the spring, but a lot of times they want to make their choice by the spring. If you can get them to do it in the fall of their junior year or maybe
then they can officially visit during the season.
Yeah.
And I know some coaches don't like they want to focus on their team, but I think it's important for a kid to be able to come in during a game week maybe and come in on a Friday and see the whole deal.
Yeah, as long as they don't have a game.
Yeah.
Yeah. But even then, like the December beforehand, sometimes there's that bowl prep. You can come in for an official, and then they have other guys who've committed or who are visiting as well. You're there. I don't see anything wrong with that, because as the timetable speeds up, and you hear like Kirk complains about it a lot, and it's like, well, kind of like with Fran, it's just the way it is. You're just gonna have to deal with it.
Yep.
And you can complain about it all you want, but it's not going to change anything. So
toothpaste ain't going back in the tube, folks.
Yeah, exactly. That thing's getting sprayed all over the place, the sink. So I don't know what else to think there, and so if but I do think that's really a smart move. I don't know what to think about the April 15th, April 30th. I think that might be a little too soon. I know for a place
Why
like
didn't
Iowa,
they just leave it at May 1st to 15th? Because then everybody's done. I think that window's better because everybody's done with spring football. Then you get a little bit of a window after spring for coaches to meet with players on the roster and kind of let them know where they stand. And then boom, this seems a little too early.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even if it was next week, say it's like instead of the 15th, it's the 20th.
Yeah.
And you go into the first week or so of May, because I know this may sound strange, but classes may have an impact too.
And I guess from a coaching standpoint, May's a big month to be out on the road recruiting, and maybe that conflicts with the transfer portal window, but you're going to have to juggle a bunch of balls at the same time anyway, no matter what now, because it's 12 months a year recruiting, portal, high school, JUCO, whatever it is. It's a full-time gig.
Yeah, no question. So, it's hard to say what'll be the next step, but I think the thing is that at least the NCAA and the football governance council, at least they're smart enough to understand that if things don't work or need to change, they change.
Yeah.
That they'll adapt year over year. If the coaches come back and say, yeah, that was just too early, it was really disruptive for the 1/3 or whatever the programs that are still in operation. See, for Iowa, they've always done it a certain way. They've had their building period, then spring break,
Yep.
then practice. And they've kind of gone through this for 5 weeks, 3 practices a week. Now they could always decide, all right, we're going to go 4 practices a week and then 3 on the last week, or do something different. If they need to, they can adjust, but still, it's how regimental these people are.
Yep.
If you give them chicken instead of beef on Wednesday, that's going to freak them out.
Very type A, folks. We got Hair Trigger 83 in the chat room, Scott, that says they need to get somebody like Ed Hinkle in the transfer portal. I've seen Ed recently out on the sidelines at Regina coaching the offense. You're going to want somebody a little younger and better shape than Ed.
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh, you mean Ed Hinkle when he played at Iowa?
Yeah.
That I would agree with. If you can get an Ed Hinkle out of the transfer portal, I think you're doing really well.
Yeah, I think you can. I think there's a lot of guys out there that fit that bill, but and maybe they decide to scholarship one of the receivers, or something. That they think Alec Wick is the next Ed Hinkle. I don't know, but I do think that they need to get at least one new body, scholarship body who's done it at the college level in this portal. They just have to, or I'm anxious to see what kind of movement there is coming up out of Iowa. I mean, we all can do it. I hate speculating as to who may leave.
Yeah, because you don't know if it's like you said, Devontae Young or Dallas Craddock situation, or a Reggie Bracey situation. You don't know it's so individualized and to a given person for what they want to do. And there is no wrong thing.
No wrong answer whatsoever. Reggie Bracey wants to play football. Good. I'm happy for you. I hope you do well. It looks good doing it. And then, hey, Dallas Craddock graduating from the University of Iowa with a degree is really important. I want to be a part of this team. I want to do everything. And I'll even play through the bowl game and then make a big tackle on special teams. Hell yes. Good for you. And then go to Kent State and maybe be a starter there. Great. That's fantastic. I don't have a problem with either one. I think that's great. I do have a little bit of a problem with somebody who maybe was only there for a semester and didn't give it a shot, but it's their life, not mine. Yep. I'm not going to judge them for it, because maybe it's just not the right fit socially, personally, football wise, whatever.
Yep. Let them choose their own path and make decisions for themselves, what they feel is best for them. It's an inexact science. You may say, listen, I'm not playing at Iowa. I want to go somewhere else to play. And then you go somewhere and you're not playing there either. Mm-hmm. Or you may go somewhere and be a starter. You just never know.
Yeah. It's happened all the time. It happens all the time to Iowa's former players.
Yep.
Where, I think I can feel comfortable in saying that a lot of us, and myself definitely included, thought Julius Brents would go and be a very good player somewhere. And he was. And he's going to be a draft pick in 2 weeks. He's going to be a second rounder probably.
And he could have been good if he stayed here.
Yeah, exactly. He would have, and I think in his case, I'm could pretty much say that he looked and saw Matt Hankins is coming back and went, man, I'm not, and I don't fault anybody who's given it the shot of taking that step up from a smaller school and surrendering their final year of eligibility, like the UNI guy, Williams a few years ago. Yeah. It's like, he just didn't make it. He wasn't Riley Moss, that's hard to do. And it wasn't Matt Hankins. So
we will see, folks. Again, happy transfer portal eve to everybody. Tomorrow or midnight tonight, it'll probably get underway with names firing in that thing. So wake up tomorrow, click on your computer, get to the transfer portal, see what's in there. And then we can start debating on social media who Iowa should get at wide receiver, and we can fight about it, and everybody will feel good. They'll feel good about winning their arguments, like when you argue about parking.
Yes, there's, what was it? A Bronx Tale, when they were arguing over a parking spot and Sonny shot somebody.
Yep.
And then
that's how bad it can get. I mean, that's the extreme parking tragedy story, and we don't want any of that.
Yeah, and then the kid grows up and shoots Sonny in the bar.
Yeah.
You know, and that can happen, and that will happen when somebody can't get out of the lot fast enough after Iowa, you know, when it's in the end of the game and Iowa just kicked the game-winning field goal to beat Wisconsin, that there's going to be somebody that's going to be mad because they didn't get, you know, home at 6:05 in time to watch Hee Haw.
Let that be a damn lesson to all you folks out there. All right, that's a good place to end. I think this thing has run its course, folks. Thank you to all of our sponsors for supporting the podcast. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We will be back again next week. It may not be Thursday. I'm trying to remember football availability.
Coordinators.
Yeah, so may not work next Thursday, but we'll work it out. We'll be back at least once next week. Who knows? Maybe twice if the transfer portal is going nuts. We'll see. We'll play it by ear in the spring. We're more regimented in the fall. But thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you to all of our sponsors. We will be back next week on the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.